This is a special presentation from the Brighton Central School District Board of Education.
Good evening and welcome to the Brighton PTSA Meet the Board of Education Candidates Night. I am Robin Samper, the president of the Brighton PTSA, and I'd like to welcome all of our candidates here with us tonight. There are 4 candidates running for 3 positions. Moderating this event is Amy Thomas, the executive director of the Monroe County School Boards Association. And Amy, thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Robin. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brighton Central School District Meet the Candidate Night. It's my pleasure to be here with all of you, but I would like to thank Robin in particular and the Brighton PTSA for their work to set up this evening, and the Brighton Technology team for their supporting efforts in streaming tonight's program to your community. As Robin said, this year there are 4 candidates with us this evening running for 3 seats. Our candidates in ballot order are Dr. Susan Gasparino, Carrielyn Bertino, Dr. Victoria Love, and Larry Davis. Providing community residents the opportunity to meet and listen to the viewpoints of the candidates that are asking to serve as elected board trustees is key to participating in our democratic process as an informed voter. Before we ask the candidates to give their opening statements, I'd like to speak to the work of elected board trustees. As said in the title, Board of Education members hold the public trust. While they're locally elected officials, those in our suburban districts are nonpartisan and unpaid. These elected volunteers will need to devote hundreds of hours during their term to learn about their roles and responsibilities and to remain current on educational trends and legislation impacting public education. They must also make sure that they're available to their community by serving on district committees, attending and participating in district functions and events throughout the year. My thanks to each one of these candidates for your commitment to pursue this important position of service to students, the community, and to public education. So candidates, you will be provided 3 minutes for an opening introductory statement and 2 minutes for a closing statement. Both of those will be done in the order that you're placed on the ballot. As a reminder, the community submitted questions to the PTSA, and as the moderator, I had the discretion to combine similar questions, reword questions, and/or rule out inappropriate or repetitious questions. The community questions will be rotated in order so that every candidate will have the opportunity to answer 2 questions first. You'll have 2 minutes to answer each question, and I'm happy to repeat any that you need to have repeated. Please watch the timekeeper, which is Robin to my left, for a yellow card, which will indicate 30 seconds are left, and a red card to know when the time is up. And we ask that you stop when you see the red card. So it's time to get to know our candidates. And we will begin with Susan. Susan, if you could give us your opening statement, please.
Wonderful. Good evening. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you to the PTSA, and thank you to Ms. Thomas for moderating tonight. So my name is Sue Gasparino, and I am running for my 2nd term on the Brighton Board of Education for the same reason that I ran the first time 3 years ago, because I love our school, and I believe there's a lot I can offer to the board and to our school community. I am a pediatrician, an educator, a tireless advocate for child health and well-being, and a mother of 3 children within the district. I am proud to say that we find ourselves today in a much better place overall as a district compared to where we were 3 years ago at the Meet the Candidates event. For one thing, we're meeting together in person instead of on Zoom. Because of COVID, we have a renewed appreciation for the importance of human connection and mental health. I am proud to have been on the Board of Education as we've formed new partnerships with Golisano Mental Health and with the Bavona Child Advocacy Center. Teachers are at the heart of what we do in Brighton, and I advocate for all efforts focused on staff wellness and teacher recruitment and retention. One of the biggest areas of overlap for me professionally in medicine and in public health and with my work on the school board is in the area of student and family experience. As a pediatrician, I know that children's health extends far beyond their physical health, and that their feeling of connection to their school community has profound implications for how they develop, whether in the classroom, on the ball field, during jazz band, on the robotics team, or just where they sit for lunch. I also firmly believe that student voice is essential when we make decisions about things that affect them, and I think we need to hear directly from students. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is integral to the work we do here every day. It inspires every decision we make, and it is at the very foundation of who we are. We must break down the inequities that are inherent in our system. We must continue to close the gap on opportunities for all our students. And we know that this work cannot happen alone, and we know that it does not happen overnight. As part of the Board of Education, I am fully committed to the work of equity, and I've collaborated in the work to expand our mindsets, practices, and environments to be more culturally responsive, more inclusive, and more deliberately reflective of our staff and student body. We currently have the highest graduation rate for all students in the history of our district. And while overall we find ourselves in a better place on the path to creating an environment where everyone feels welcome, there is more work to be done. I have loved dedicating my time these past 3 years on the Board of Education, and I hope to serve an additional 3 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Susan. Carrielyn.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. First and foremost, I wanted to thank Amy and the Monroe County School Board Association and Robert, and the PTSA for hosting this evening, as well as all of you and at home for spending your time with us and being a part of this process. I am Carrielyn Bertino. Some of you might remember me as Carrielyn Dolan. I have been a resident in this district for a total of 38 years. My husband Greg and I have 3 children in the district. Ellie will be going into 5th grade. Charlie will be going into 1st grade, and Brody will be starting kindergarten in the fall. And I've already warned Mr. Tappan to batten down the hatches. I am a proud K-12 graduate of our Brighton education system. After moving away for a short while to attend college and pursue my first career, I chose to come back home to the community that I loved. Shortly after coming back home, I realized I continually gravitated toward working with children through volunteer opportunities. At 27 years of age, I went back to school to pursue my passion of education. While working on my master's, I was hired as a teaching assistant at Fres, and I completed my program and became duly certified in both general education and special education by New York State. I was then hired full-time teacher at Fres and eventually was tenured. For 13 years, I participated in everything I could, including building and district level committees, piloting programs, curriculum writing, writing and reviews. I taught intervention and extension programs before and after school and summers. I mentored several student teachers and observers and planned events for my colleagues. I was honored to have been awarded the PTSA Lifetime Membership Award. I did all of these things not because I was required to, but because I felt it important and necessary to continually learn and grow so that we are always offering the best we can for all of our students. I truly thought I would retire as a teacher in this district, but life had other plans. When our second child was born, we received a birth diagnosis of Down syndrome, and at that point, I made the decision to leave my beloved career to put the needs of my family first. While I was home with my children, I was honored to become one of the founding members of Gigi's Playhouse Rochester, an international not-for-profit that provides free educational and therapeutic programming to individuals of all ages. After opening the doors of that location and serving a 5-year term, I sought out a PTSA building co-chair at Fres, and I'm currently still doing that. Most recently, I am a co-founder and owner of a small business with an important mission to provide inclusive work opportunities, focusing on the IDD population, and we are working with Brighton High School providing those opportunities. I am extremely proud and grateful that I have been endorsed by the Brighton Teachers Association, and it is my sincere hope that as the night progresses, you will understand how privileged I would feel to share my unique background and experience with our Board of Education and community, while keeping all of our students at the center of every decision that we make. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carrielyn. Victoria?
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Love. I'm appreciative of these great candidates and everyone that's made this evening possible. Thank you, Mrs. Thomas, for moderating, and I'd like to give a special thanks to Robin and the PTSA. My family and I are new to Brighton, but we've lived in Monroe County for 8 years. We located here from San Diego. My husband and I have 2 wonderful, kind-hearted students. We have a graduating senior and a capable 7th grader. My family is eternally grateful for the kind teachers, administrators, staff, and students that have welcomed them and who have helped them when there were challenges. We also appreciated communicating with the governance team during recent DEI-focused community meetings. I have met other Brightonians that have recently arrived, and I also know many long-term Brighton residents. Overall, parents are grateful for the quality of education and extracurricular activities here. However, some students, including some students from historically marginalized groups, including kids with disabilities, would be more open to dialogues with our school district. One reason that I'm running for the Board of Education is that I understand how clear communication and shared goals can enhance educational outcomes for all students, knowing that many might need extra support. A life of service and commitment to education has prepared me. At 22, I received an honorable discharge from the U.S. Navy. As a first-generation college student, I independently financed my education. I earned a PhD in immunology from Harvard Medical School the year after my first child was born. Each of these empowering experiences showed me the meaning of collaboration, mentorship, duty, courage, excellence, and love. I worked as a teaching assistant at San Diego State University and Harvard Medical School. I've also volunteered in several venues, such as the PTSA, the TCMS School-Based Equity Team, and the Brighton Families of Color Group, to name a few. The last few years have been exceedingly challenging, but we're grateful for the members of our school district for delivering and maintaining high-quality education throughout very unpredictable times. Understandably, many students continue to need extra academic and social emotional support as we continue to move bravely forward. I know that BCSD is committed to ensuring that kids and teachers have access to resources to help them achieve and maintain successful outcomes and experiences.
Thank you, Victoria. Larry.
My name is Larry Davis, and I'm asking for your vote for the 2023 to 2026 Board of Ed term. I'm pretty much a lifelong Brighton resident. I'm a K through 12 graduate of the system, class of 81, so you can start to do your math now. My wife and I are very proud parents of 3 K through 12 graduates, all who have since graduated. And I find myself in the 3rd constituency in Brighton, going from student to parent of students to residents who love this community and want to stay here. We feel incredibly fortunate to have brought up our kids in Brighton. We love this community. We understand very well that the educational system is a huge reason it's almost impossible to buy a house in Brighton right now. And while we have closed a ton of gaps in the last decade that I've served on this board, we have a lot more to do. I'm incredibly proud of the improvement in graduation rates, the improvement in the quality of our social emotional learning, and then one that plays specifically to my job experience, the amount of time we spent trying to create better learning spaces for our kids across all forms of learning. The new Council Rock School, from a facility standpoint, is just an outstanding learning space, and those kids benefit from that space. The athletic fields, the stadium field, and the tracks are greatly improved, and the performing arts space at the high school is just a joy. I love applying that experience that I have to some of those facility projects, but I also love having the really difficult conversations around, okay, we've narrowed the gap for graduation, but it's got to be narrower. Okay, we've made great progress on academic performance and social emotional learning and a whole bunch of initiatives, but we're not there yet. And then something happens like it did 2 weeks ago, and we get swatted and we go, oh geez, we got to start to figure those things out as well from a security standpoint. Those things are challenging, those discussions and decisions are difficult, but they're important. And I'm asking for your permission, for your vote, to be part of those continuing discussions so we can continue to drive improvements. Before I close, I want to acknowledge Julene Gilbert, who is retiring after 2 decades of service. An outstanding board member beyond any description. All of us on the board think of her as that knowing, wise sister who always seems to be able to weigh in with a piece of wisdom or a piece of calm during a really stormy discussion. This community is beyond lucky to have had Julene's service. And I will also say her sort of passion projects, brighten your wardrobe, and say yes to the dress or say yes to the outfit. Say everything you need to about Julene. When we're outfitting kids to feel great at prom, of every kind, size, color, and type, and they all walk out of there with an outfit that fits and feels great, and Julene gets to beam with pride. So Julene, thank you for your service.
Thanks, Larry. Okay, so now it's time for the question and answer portion of the evening. And just to go over the rules again, answers should not exceed 2 minutes. When there are 30 seconds remaining, you saw over here the bright yellow card. That's 30 seconds, and then when your time is up, the red card will be shown. So if you could take a look out of your left corner of your eye and just keep an eye over here. And then when the time is up, your notification will be shown, okay? Are we set? Okay, we're going to go in ballot order. So for the first question, we'll begin with Susan again. Susan, please explain what motivated you to run for the Brighton School Board and the perspective that you bring to the board table.
Excellent question. So what motivated me to run for the Brighton School Board 3 years ago, my initial run, really was a love for the school. I remember picking up my packet to run. I met with Dr. McGowan and I told him my intention to run, and he said, "It sounds like you're about to launch a campaign of positivity." And I said, "That's exactly right. It's a campaign of positivity." I love the district. What I bring to it, I'm a communicator, I'm a collaborator. I love to work with different groups of people and help bring people into the table. And what motivated me to run was I thought I could help be a mouthpiece to connect the community with the amazing work that's done in the district. And I definitely feel, after 3 years, I do feel that's the role that I sort of have taken on in the board. I love that position professionally. You know, I ran at the beginning of the launch of a massive pandemic, which is sort of also in my professional wheelhouse as a pediatrician. And so among the communication and aspects, I'm also able to bring scientific background, knowledge of the whole child, health for students and families, and I think that's also been really valuable. And so I look forward to continuing to work with the board. It took 3 years to really understand how complex the role of a school board member really is. It is a massive commitment. It is a lot of time. There's a steep learning curve. And now that I really feel I've hit my stride, I am looking forward to really applying that over the next 3 years. Thanks.
Thank you, Susan. Carrielyn.
Thank you. I also have a love and passion for this district, obviously with my 38 years invested here. I have missed really being part of the school community. Like I said, mentioned I was a teacher. I'm passionate about the work in the education. I'm passionate about continually looking at how we can strive to do better for all of our children and for all of them to walk out of Brighton having a meaningful and successful experience here. Like Sue mentioned, I have board experience as well, and I pride myself on being a good collaborator, a good listener, and really putting in the hard work. And when my son was born, I became very comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think that that's something that you really need to have as a board member when you're here looking at some more difficult and challenging situations. Again, I come from a historical perspective of Brighton. I not only was a student here, I not only was a teacher here, but I'm a current parent here as well. So I can bring that insight and perspective, as well as, you know, really be a liaison between the board and the work that we're doing and our teachers and our students, because I have strong relationships in this town. I'm really proud to say when I see my signs, I see signs in parents' yards, I see signs in neighbors, I see signs in friends' yards, I see signs in my parents' friends' yards, and I'm really proud of the outreach that I've been supported with. So I really do think that my background in teaching and my love and passion for this community would be one of the reasons why I chose to serve.
Thank you, Carrielyn.
Thank you.
Victoria.
Hi, thank you. As everyone knows, we relocated to this area from San Diego. In 2014, during spring break, we actually traveled here And one of the first school districts that we visited was Brighton. And the reason for that is, from far, we just looked at the information that was available on the website. We just tried to get an understanding of the demographics of the school district, and just get an overall feel for the community just by looking at what was available online. So when we decided to visit here, we had an opportunity to meet with the superintendent, we didn't meet teachers, but we did have like a tour of the school, and had a chance to witness firsthand the diversity that we saw. And we set about trying to buy a house. We were renting an apartment at the time, put in a few bids, and unfortunately we weren't able to buy anything. So, the inventory in Brighton is pretty low. And so we made a hard choice to move to another district. We were there for about 7 years, and during that 7-year time period, we actually tried buying twice more in Brighton. So it's been a long road, and on our third attempt, we were successful. And what brought us here was what we understood about the academics, about the culture here. We liked that people in the school district had a language to really talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. As a parent of children of color, I also have a child that is disabled, and that's also LGBTQIA identifying. And so I'm going to be honest, we had kind of a rough road finding a place where we felt like our children.
Thank you, Victoria. Larry?
Candidly, sometimes the kid that provides you with the most headaches provides you with the most learning. And my oldest son and I talk about this a lot. And diversity has a lot of angles, but what I would say was at the time, and my oldest son graduated a while ago, this school system does an excellent job prepping students for a 4-year college. And if that's not your path, it wasn't as easy a path. And Dr. Hall and Dr. McGowan and I have had these discussions for a while. Because you put up a college poster in that cafeteria, and if you're not going to a college, you might end up feeling like a failure. To my son's great credit, he had a lot of confidence, occasionally too much confidence, but that's a different story. But I didn't feel like I advocated well enough for him. And he's living a fabulous life with his partner. They own a home. They're doing great locally. But at the time, I didn't think this school system had diverse thinking around non-4-year degrees. And it's gotten a lot better. And I think a couple years ago, Dr. Hall called me because on the college wall, 2 kids had chosen the electrical trades, and those were up on the walls. And so that was my driving force for joining. And I'll sort of echo something that Sue said. The first 3 years on the board hit you like a friendly wallop because you don't know what you don't know, and the scale of what I didn't know was like Grand Canyon size. So that was my motivating force, and then being able to apply my facilities experience later on as we really embraced how do we improve and update our facilities has been sort of the second element.
Thanks, Larry. Okay, for the second question, we'll begin with you, Carrielyn. How will you, in your role as a board member, ensure adequate supports are in place to meet academic and social emotional needs of all students?
I think curriculum is my thing. I love curriculum. I've been a part of the writing. I've been a part of the reviewing. And I've watched, now that we're going back and really looking at curriculum through the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion, how we're making changes and making sure that our opportunities in curriculum are inclusive of everybody. So I think my role as a board member is going to be a little tough because I need to transition from that teacher role and be more of the person who's listening to what we're listening to the curriculum. I need to be asking the critical questions of the curriculum, and I need to be making sure that we can really align the resources to what our teachers and our administrators in our schools really need as far as the curriculum is concerned. And I hope I answered all portions of that question.
Thanks, Carrielyn.
Thanks.
Victoria.
Thank you. As a board member, I would really spend the time to educate myself about the New York State standards and to communicate with teachers and board members and just understand what all the guidelines are and get input from the teachers in terms of different strategies that they might want to use within the framework of the policies that are in place to guide the curriculum. I think students benefit when their teachers can be creative, but obviously we have policies and different structures that must be followed. With respect to the social emotional learning component, I think it's very important to partner with people who truly understand that space to make sure that that content is delivered the way that it is intended. And to always keep in mind that there is a diverse population of students who might receive information differently. And so I think it's really important we know that we have this culturally responsive framework, but I think it's critical to get feedback from people from diverse backgrounds to make sure that we're exposing kids to materials that are meant to help them and that can really help them, anytime, but especially now that we're all back in person and have been through some pretty traumatic times.
Thanks, Victoria.
Can you repeat the question,
I
please?
sure will. How will you, in your role as a board member, ensure adequate supports are in place to meet the academic and social emotional needs of all students?
So I agree with the curriculum segment of that because the curriculum drives that. But I think that another initiative that goes across all schools that is near and dear to all of our leaders' hearts is making sure each student has a connection with an adult. And understanding that each individual is an individual learner, understanding what they need. We have a great school counseling staff. The organization that Diana Spagnula leads, which looks at kids who have different abilities and how we make sure they're successful. So the curriculum is critically important, of course, but I think the start of that is having an adult connection for each of the kids so they know they're being listened to, and we have a better chance of delivering what they need so they can get the best impact out of school.
Thanks, Larry. Susan?
Excellent. I'll just jump into, I agree with what everyone said, and I think that this question gets a little bit at accountability because we can put things in place, but we also have to be held accountable, to make sure that our good intentions are being received. And so I think that, just relying on the blueprint, we set standards and priorities at the beginning of every school year. And rather than just set those and then leave them until the following year when we again set the standards, we've been more deliberate this past year at every school board meeting, we get report out of how we are specifically meeting the goals that we've set. And so I think just having that accountability piece has been really important. Something else, we're fully funded this year from New York State, which allows us to take positions that we created with COVID funding and make those positions permanent. And so we have more people on the ground with our students in positions helping each child, reach their full academic potential. It also helps us by being fully funded, thanks to Fight for Brighton for working on that. It helps us to maintain smaller class sizes, and again, really just to make sure we're not missing any kids or letting any kids fall through the cracks.
Thank you, Susan. For the next question, we'll begin with Victoria. How does the role of a board trustee differ from the role of a superintendent?
From my understanding, and should I be elected to the board, I will learn a lot more about this. The board's three main goals or duties would be to hire the superintendent and also to propose an annual budget and sorry, I'll need a moment there. And also to help to prepare the strategic plans for the school district throughout the year. And also to represent the community, and to also work collectively with the board. The superintendent's role would be to take the directives from the school board and to collaborate and direct the work and activities of the staff, the teachers and the administrators, and to report out work as it is completed to the board, and to work with the board to really drive the mission and goals of the school board to support all the students and faculty and staff.
Thank you, Victoria.
Sure.
Larry, same question?
Sure. The most important role of the school board is to hire and then assess the superintendent. So that search committee that took place a number of years ago that hired Dr. McGowan, we now as a board each year assess his performance. And we review the blueprint, and I think as Sue mentioned a few minutes ago, we get readouts on a periodic basis to understand how we're doing against that blueprint. The strategic plans, the way we structure it in Brighton anyway, the creation of the blueprint, which is basically going to be Dr. McGowan's report card, if you will, is done in conjunction with the community. It's done in conjunction with teachers and administrators and the board. So that's a collaborative effort, but at the end of the day, the board's most important function is to hire and then assess annually the performance of the superintendent. So that blueprint is sort of our assessment form, if you will, and that's what we review and update every 6 months.
Thanks, Larry. Susan?
I'll just jump right in to pick up sort of where Larry left off. You know, our main job, we have one employee really as a Board of Education, and that employee is our superintendent. It's not our job as Board of Education members to manage the day-to-day running of the school. That really is the job of the superintendent and their team. We as a Board of Education set the big picture. By creating the budget, we're able to showcase what our priorities are as a district. We have to ensure that all state and federal laws are being carried out correctly, but sort of the finesse in how we do it, that's really where we can shine and show what's special about our district and what we prioritize in our budget. And so we sort of maintain the big picture, and again, we hold ourselves accountable and our district accountable by really making sure we are adhering to what we set out in the blueprint at the beginning of every school year.
Thank you, Susan. Carrielyn,
Thanks.
same question.
I agree with everything that everybody said, and try to think of how to say this creatively to not repeat everybody. Repeat everyone's answers. I really look at the board as a macro level. You know, we're in charge of the governance, obviously evaluation of the superintendent, working to adopt a budget and presenting that, you know, to the community. Dr. McGowan's job is actually that. And really being a steward for the community and listening and hearing what people have to say. And then Dr. McGowan's role is really on the micro level, the day-to-day, the strategy, the operations, executing all of the visionary plans that we've discussed and put into place. And I really do look at those two relationships as a collaborative working relationships, and really the systems of checks and balances, that we make sure each of us are doing our roles and continually carrying out our jobs.
Thank you. Larry, for the next question, we'll begin with you. How can the Board of Education help ensure that all students are prepared for an increasingly complex world upon graduation?
Well, there's a couple of different ways. I've mentioned two of them. One, that we have a good adult connection for every student. Two, curriculum. How do we find that student's strengths, their interests, and let them sort of flourish in those areas? And it could be arts, athletics, academics, or some combination of all of those things. That social emotional learning we talked about before, that I prefaced with that human connection, that adult connection, that becomes critically important here. We talk about having kids graduate from here being ready to participate in society in a meaningful way, to be able to advocate for others, and to be able to understand sort of what's going on in their social environment. I'm incredibly impressed with the job all of the principals, but certainly in this environment, Dr. Hall has done to have so many student connections there, the number and diversity of clubs where kids can connect with the athletics. We have amazing participation levels in athletics and in the arts, and all of those things which create social community. You find people like you who have common interests, will help you when you graduate sort of gravitate towards, I know there's a community for me out there, I can find those folks and we can be successful together. So I'll continue to emphasize the adult connections that we make for every kid, the social emotional learning focus, and having a curriculum diverse enough where people can find their interests and their friend groups.
Thanks, Larry. Susan.
I think that's so well said, Larry. And you know, one of the most incredible things about serving on the Board of Education, so in addition to hearing about my 3 children's experiences every day in school, where I learned so much and I'm applying so much of what I'm learning from them, especially my 8th grader in my own master's classes I'm taking. They can use Canva. Their innovation technology usage is far superior than anything I have. So that's just from the 3 kids. And one of the amazing things about being on the Board of Education is at our twice monthly meetings, we hear from people working in our district, principal reports, special services report, student services report. We can see exactly what's happening, what strides are being made in the classrooms and outside the classrooms. We recently had a presentation from Dr. Tracy Glazer's team about the innovation initiative in the district, and it was outstanding. How young they're starting, right in kindergarten, with these programmable robots, little bees that can calculate and do word problems. It starts early. And so we're constantly being reminded of those things at these presentations. Again, we're starting earlier with our initiatives to prepare our students for a complex world later on. Full implementation of social emotional learning at Council Rock with counselor support, second step lessons. We're starting early, we're offering more, and I think that we're responding, to the increasing needs of our students. And again, I think we're really holding ourselves accountable.
Thank you, Susan. Carrielyn.
Thank you. I think first and foremost being really proactive with our social emotional learning so our students are prepared and can take care of their mental health as our world keeps evolving and changing. I think really teaching our children, what we do, I think a really great job in Brighton is teaching our children how to think, not what to think. Being really good at looking at lots of different sources and generating their own opinions and feelings on the way the world is right now. Preparing our kids to be global citizens, being part of that democratic process, being people of advocacy, and really being the we, not me generation in our future leaders. Utilizing technology like Sue just mentioned and continually evolving with that and making sure that we're up to date on all of the latest and greatest things that we can offer so our students again are prepared for being out in the workforce and choosing the careers that they want to be a part of. And understanding, and this is a really big one for me, understanding that preparation and success for the future looks different for everybody, and really, really, really genuinely caring for the individuality of each student. And like Larry had mentioned earlier, college is not always the plan for our kids. And so how are we going to make them feel super successful if they want to pursue a career in theater or music or sports or the trades? So I think, really continually working on that and providing opportunities for our students.
Thank you, Carrielyn. Victoria?
Okay, great. As a parent of kids that have recently come into the school district, I think that it's very vital, very important to make sure that we truly understand where our students stand academically, especially now that we're emerging from this pandemic. There are some gaps in knowledge for some students, and I feel that children are placed in a specific grade level, and perhaps there were lower grades where there was some, pieces missing. So I think that as your kids get older, if that's been the experience for them, that they might struggle. And so you'd never want to have to hold a kid back. I know that would be really challenging for a child. So what can we do to help those kids that need a little bit of extra shoring up and make it so that it is really effective and also enjoyable for the kid, and having them buy into, if I do extra work right now, then when I get to 10th grade, I'll be ready. When I get to 9th grade, I'll feel comfortable. I can enjoy my experience at school. So that's one thing. I think report cards only tell part of the story, right? So those academic assessments are critical, and then having that recovery plan if needed. Also, mentorships are really important to help kids kind of understand what they really love to do. A lot of kids, honestly, tend to get a little bit bored in school, and what do you do for those kids? They haven't found their thing yet, so I think that's really important. And bringing in more teachers of diverse backgrounds so that our kids are more prepared for when they leave home and they go to other places to learn.
Thank you, Victoria. The next question will begin with Susan. What is the meaning of diversity, equity, and inclusion? And how can the board best support the governance of policies that are meaningful to a culturally diverse school population and community?
That's a great question, and actually, again, it's at the center of what we do in Brighton. We've come a long way. It's a journey to try to understand what diversity, equity, inclusion encompasses. And I think that having a deliberate approach to how we are going to close achievement gaps has been something we've really doubled down on. It used to be thought of where it was almost on its own. It was another separate thing. And we said to ourselves over the past at least 3 years that I've been on the board, it shouldn't be separate. It can't be and diversity, equity, and inclusion. It is diversity, equity, inclusion. Every decision we make, it's at the foundation of who we are. Not a decision is made now without thinking about it from the perspective of all our learners. It's not enough to boast a high graduation rate if it's not affecting all student stakeholders. We've created school-based equity teams, and these teams are made up of parents, teachers, to really dig into actionable items that we can do. In medicine, we take an approach called plan, do, study, act. So you plan, you do, you put something in place, and that's not enough. Now we go further. Now we study it. How is the intervention? What are the quantitative results? What are the qualitative results? How are our students receiving this? Are test scores improving? Are we making more options available? How are we choosing who gets to be in an accelerated program? Who gets enrichment? And then we change it, we make it better, and we redo it. And so I think it's not enough just to say diversity, equity, inclusion. We really have to make actionable items and do it. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Susan. Carrielyn?
Again, I agree with Sue. We definitely have come a long way. I can tell you just from the time of me leaving the classroom in 2017 to now, there's been substantial changes in the way we approach curriculum, the way we approach our hiring practices, the way we are being culturally responsive when we're teaching our students and really building community and multiculturalism. So I think we've come a really long way, and we need to acknowledge that, but we obviously have a lot more to go when it comes to our diversity, equity, and inclusion plans here for the district. We need to look through that lens at literally everything that we do, from the tiniest decisions to the largest decisions in our school. And I think that, and this is what's really near and dear to my heart, that when we constantly are striving for that inclusion piece and that diversion piece, and that we know that we are really offering equitable resources, equitable programming, and having access to the things that every child in this district deserves, it will become commonplace. People won't question it. And that's really the goal, that eventually down the road, DEI is just commonplace. It's part of our everyday practices, and it's part of our values of a community, and we don't question it any longer. We should always question, but that it's just part of who we are as a being.
Thank you, Carrielyn. Victoria.
Thank you. I think that continuous feedback really is what's necessary to ensure that the goals are being met. I think that it's critical to speak directly to the people from the various affinity groups. I think oftentimes leaders will listen to their constituents or hear grievances of a student and take a certain course of action. But that action may or may not be helpful, and without having direct feedback from the people that are being impacted, there's no real way to know. And I think that what we also sometimes see is that when people do have challenges or they do have grievances and they've reached out for help, and that help isn't in a form that they need, they eventually give up and stop asking for the help. So I think that really getting the feedback and taking the appropriate actions to solve the problems is ideal. In addition to that, representation matters. We really, truly must have more teachers of diverse backgrounds in our school district. And I know, and I want to applaud the fact that some of the hiring practices have been changed and really examined, but unfortunately the retention rates for those teachers are not that high. And so I think it's really important to understand what's driving that. So those are the main things. Continually checking in, listening to the voices of the people that are being impacted by the policies that they're asked to follow.
Thank you, Victoria. Larry.
We've made some great progress, and we're proud of that. But we talk as a board that if you're going to stop for a minute and pat yourself on the back, you also need to be prepared to kick yourself in the behind for where you still got gaps. So what I would say is just a couple of thoughts. This year for the first time, and this was the brainchild of I think Dr. Hall and Jeff Green, and I don't know who else, we took our students of color to the HBCU trip to see a number of the historically black colleges and universities. Smashing success. One of the students who graduated from Brighton was there to give a tour at Howard University. Where else can you see yourself than, hey, graduated from my school and now I'm going to go take a tour? I encourage you to watch that video. It's one of the best things I've seen on YouTube in years. But I also, and I mentioned this before, diversity is an enormous word. And we have changed our hiring practices. And we are being much more deliberate about hiring teachers of color. But we've also made efforts to look at holidays and culture. We celebrated Eid. We celebrated Eid on the wrong day. But it worked out because we learned from that. So as you're trying to do new things, you have to be okay to make a mistake. We had an outreach from the East Asian community that said we'd like to talk about Diwali. So we're looking at that now to see how we can address that for that section of our community. Brighton's a unique place. We've got Jewish temples, mosques, Catholic Church, Baptist, it's a great place for diversity, and we just have to have an acknowledgement for that. So making great progress, but we have a ton of work to do.
Thanks, Larry. For the next question, we'll begin with Carrielyn. Carrielyn, how do you envision the path toward making a change to the middle and high school day start times?
Didn't know if this was going to come up or not, and this is one of the reasons when in the past I considered running for the school board, and I didn't know if I had a lot to offer on this topic. So I think really I don't have a specific opinion on this, and I think that it's important in any process that we go through within the board is really looking at, first of all, listening to what the opinions of the community are, and then looking at the data and listening to the experts on what they're going to tell us would be the best impact for our students. So sadly, I don't have a specific answer, but I really think reaching out to the community and finding information on this and learning would be my path.
Thank you. Victoria?
This is a truly important question. Years ago, when I was in college, I remember learning about just the impact of lack of sleep on young people. And the American Academy of Pediatrics also endorses students having later start times. That's been shown to, well, you know all the data, presumably, so I won't repeat that. But in terms of how to implement later start times, which I think is truly important if we want to protect our students' mental health and their overall physical health, well-being, and their cognition, it would be hard to do, but I think that there are blueprints for this because other school districts have gone through these processes. It would be really important to find out what's worked, what hasn't worked, with the understanding that every school system is different, but at least you can get a survey of what other people have done, other schools have done around the country, and locally as well. So I'm glad that this topic is brought up as a point of discussion again, and it certainly deserves a lot more research.
Thank you, Victoria. Larry?
The direct answer is we've had trouble finding a path to that answer. We don't own our own buses. So our issue has been costs of somewhere between $500,000 and $750,000 annually to do this. The other aspect of this is our younger kids, which is French Road and Council Rock, would have much earlier start times. In a few cases, having to be at the bus stop before 6 in the morning to be able to make the runs. We've looked at this twice in the time I've been on the board, and we've been unable to figure out a way to do it, which is different than there is absolutely science that says there is a benefit to doing it. So the structure, the geographic structure of our district, which is 4 schools, and how we break out amongst those schools, and the fact that we don't own our buses make it a very challenging thing. We might be able to get to a point where we can afford that additional $500,000 to $750,000 annually to do it. And I wasn't on the last review committee that did it, but it's a difficult goal to make, and we haven't figured out how to do it yet. But we'll look at it again.
Thank you, Larry. Susan?
Great question. I'm actually a member of the American Academy of Pediatrics, and so I know the data extremely well. You know, what the tough thing is, though, is looking at what we call, in public health, the unintended consequences of adaptation. So for any change that you make, there's all these other unintended consequences sometimes that you haven't really thought about. So the science is there, the data is there. Our teenagers' circadian rhythms are different, right? They'd love to sleep till 10 in the morning, if not later. But what happens with that, the unintended consequences is in our district, where we don't own our own buses, we'll have younger kids waiting for buses in the dark or walking to school in the dark if they don't have a parent who's home who's able to drive them. And so that gets at equity for working parents. Childcare becomes another issue. And again, this is not even about finances. This is just about these other unintended consequences. Childcare becomes an issue, not only for the students who are home by themselves in the morning, but also for our teachers of our younger students. So the Council Rock teachers now, they have to find places for their young children. Financially, again, it would be a tax increase. Is it equitable? Is this something our community values enough to justify a tax increase significant of $1 million every year? And we surveyed the community at the time last year. I was on the start time committee, and at that time, the community support wasn't fully all the way there yet. They weren't willing to make that sacrifice. And so we tabled it. We're going to revisit it again in 4 years. We are fully funded now, which does change things a bit. And again, as a solution, because I think you asked what's our best way forward, so here's a solution. We might partner maybe through the Monroe County School Boards Association, where all districts can make a change to better align times of schools.
Thank you, Susan. I like the plug for Monroe County School Boards Association.
Gotcha, Amy.
I appreciate that. Okay, Victoria, we're going to begin with you on this next question. What is your position on the current state of academic accelerated programs in the Brighton Central School District?
I think that this is definitely a question that is related to equity on a lot of different levels. So you have students that want that extra challenge, who can do that work and who want to do it. And if they want to be able to take those AP classes, I would truly want them to have those AP classes. If they wanted to be in accelerated math, or accelerated English classes, I think that they should have access to that. I think, though, that it's important to kind of start laying the groundwork for this when the kids are younger. So when students are in primary school, when they're in elementary school, how much are those kids being challenged so that as they move up, as the cohorts move up, there are fewer achievement gaps, fewer disparities between different racial lines and different students from other marginalized groups. I think that traditionally that has been a problem. Some kids have more access because perhaps their parents are able to provide them tutors, or they've got two parents at home that can help them with homework. And I think that if we want to have that situation where accelerated classes are offered, it would be really important to make sure that more people can participate in that process, and to look at the reasons and the barriers to kids being able to participate if they would like to.
Thank you, Victoria. Larry?
I think we're actually in a pretty good space, and I'll keep saying that we can do better. We have more kids taking APs from all of the different groups than we have ever had in the past, and we have more kids graduating with college credit than we ever have had in the past. This wouldn't normally come at the board level because Dr. Hall and his team would handle it, but when there has been an issue with the cost of an AP test or something like that, that's been handled within the high school itself. That's not something that would normally bubble up to us, but we're seeing higher participation than we have ever seen, and we are seeing more success than we have ever seen. But there is still a gap that still has to be addressed, and that's going to be a focus point.
Thanks, Larry. Susan?
Could you just repeat the question one more
Sure.
time, please?
What is your, oh, sorry. No, I'm going back and forth now. We're getting toward the end, I can tell. What is your position on the current state of academic accelerated programs offered in the Brighton Central School District?
Excellent. Good question. I was talking with some fellow board members yesterday, and I said one of the most wonderful things about being a school board member is that we work with an amazing group of people in our district who are experts, absolute experts in this very field. And so the topic of accelerated math in 3rd and 4th grade came up at a school board meeting 3 or 4 board meetings ago. I've lost track. And my initial gut response, just like a parent, was, you can't cut third grade accelerated math. How could we do that? And then the extremely wise Dr. Rio was able to explain, no one's cutting anything, but the danger of using a program just because we've always done it without examining what is the reasoning behind it is that children who are not accelerated in 3rd grade at age 7 or 8 may come to label themselves as not a math person at age 7. And could that label carry with them throughout their career because someone said at age 7, you haven't qualified for accelerated math? And so that's not right. We can't have that. And so Dr. Rio was able to explain from her curricular expertise that, the thinking is, to give kids time to adapt before we start to accelerate. And why do we always have to pull out and make acceleration something different? If we used more of like an English language arts model, we can have different level children in the same classroom reading different level texts. And some of the data, because again, here we are with accountability and data, some of the data now shows that you can do the same thing within one math group at the younger grades. And so I think looking at the research and offering acceleration to as many children we can to ensure that all of our children have access to all opportunities Brighton provides is important.
Thank you, Susan. Carrielyn.
Thank you. I agree with everything that Sue said, that we traditionally look at accelerated programs through our APs and our math programs, and I think that's our traditional view and definition of acceleration in our schools. But what we need to give more credit to is the acceleration that teachers do on a daily basis with students in their classrooms, and really giving teachers opportunities to learn and train on how to even more so diversify that acceleration. Like Sue had mentioned, you know, looking at a topic, everyone should have access to the same learning, but the output and the ways that they could approach having their final task and showing what they know could look very different and really reach all the different strengths of learners in our classrooms. So I think we do a great job of offering programs, but also would be really interested to hear what the community has to say and what they're looking for. And I know that that third go for accelerated math was a hot topic a few weeks ago, and there really is a lot of data around why that decision was made, and sometimes we don't necessarily understand it, but if we communicate it more accurately to everyone, or not even more accurate, but more consistently to people, so you really hear the messaging, I think that would be important for the views on acceleration.
Thanks, Carrielyn. So this is the final question of the evening. That's right. Everybody take a deep breath right now. And we will start off with Larry. How would you address a problematic experience brought to your attention by a student, family, staff, or community member?
It happens a lot to all of the board members because we're part of this community. We shop at Wegmans and we do all the places where we run into our neighbors. So it's a common occurrence, and I appreciate it that people will bring things to us. The short answer is I direct them to the people who can solve their problem best and most efficiently, not from an expediency standpoint, but people who will have a good first level knowledge of the situation. So in a hypothetical, if a student was having a challenge at French Road, I'd connect them with Dr. Rio in this particular case and have them address that situation with her or whomever they sort of designated. We do have students, as part of their classes in the high school, contact us directly with issues. And for those, we respond to those, I respond to those, and also connect them to people at the same time. It will surprise no one that our students are incredibly thoughtful and have really interesting ideas on how to address issues. And it helps to hear them. So honestly, I love receiving them. The role of the board is not to solve them, it's to connect them with the people who can really help them out.
Thank you, Larry. Susan.
I agree with Larry. I think, you know, again, knowing our role as Board of Education members, you know, it's not to immediately fix the problem. We are a group of 7. We work collaboratively together to sort of like, you know, manage our school. I think I welcome opinions from people who are having a problematic experience. I think we should. I think that's when we learn and that's when we grow. So no person's experience or perspective or problem should ever be viewed as a negative. It's a good thing because it gives us the opportunity to see that something we're doing is not working right for someone. Even if it's well intended, if it's not being received that way, it's a learning opportunity. And it also helps to foster the communication to encourage that person to go to up the chain of command. And they might not know that. Maybe we haven't advertised that well enough. Maybe they don't know who they need to reach out to, who could best address their concern. And so, again, not being afraid of dealing with someone who's having a concern, because as Victoria said something, you know, if we don't listen every time, at some point they're going to stop complaining or stop trying, and we don't want that. We want people to continually come and tell us so that we can work to make it better, but we can't do that unless we know.
Thank you, Susan. Carrielyn.
Thank you. do have original thoughts, but again, piggybacking off of Sue, I look again at the role of the board at that macro level, but I do think it's incredibly important to hear people and really listen and thoughtfully listen. Not, so often, I hate to say this, but so often when you're listening to someone who may have a differing opinion of yours, or just really a differing opinion of yours, you're kind of tuning out, or you're thinking about your opinions, and really being an active listener and giving them the credit that they deserve, that they're coming to you and they're expressing their feelings and thoughts. Again, our job as a board member is not to necessarily fix those daily problems. I do think it's important that those are brought to the board so people can understand what the feelings are out in the community. But I would act as a liaison for that individual, and to help them guide and advocate them through the proper channels of trying to resolve their feelings, or what's happening, or encourage them to advocate in a certain way. So that's really the approach I would take if someone came to me to share their feelings. I really would validate, because I think it's so important to know what everyone's feelings are in this district, and share that with the board. So we always keep those ideals on the horizon, and making sure that we're informing our decisions with what we hear and the feedback from all community members.
Thank you, Carrielyn. Victoria?
Okay, great. Yes, I completely agree with what everyone has said. I think that if a person comes to you and they confide in you, it means that they have some level of trust, and that they have come to you for a reason. Now, as a board member, the role is not to take on individual people's problems, and as others have said, you should direct them to the appropriate resources. But you want that person to be heard and affirmed. You want them to feel like they did the right thing by coming to speak to you. And we can be empathetic. If somebody's having a challenge, we can give them that personal empathy without necessarily doing the problem solving with them. So yes, connecting them with people in the buildings who can actually help them resolve conflicts or any kind of other problems that they might be having. And then I think importantly, revisiting with that person to make sure that they feel like their concerns were addressed adequately, to make sure that they feel like that in coming to you, they made the right choice, they were actually helped. And if for whatever reason their problem has not been resolved, then you start that process all over again and send them, onward to someone else who might be able to help. Or maybe you have a community meeting, a small meeting with the other people that have been involved in hearing that person's grievance, to ensure that everybody's aligned and that person is heard.
Thank you, Victoria. So we've come to the end of our question and answer portion of the program. Each candidate will now be given 2 minutes for their closing statements, and those summations will begin in the ballot order, just as we did at the beginning. So Susan, you may start us off.
Thank you all for coming tonight. I believe a Board of Education serves its community, its teachers and its students of all ages and backgrounds. I bring to the Board of Education my optimism and energy, my love of collaboration, my integrity, and my steadfast adherence to doing what is just. I'm a born communicator. With 3 kids in the district, I will be alongside you all, experiencing our schools in real time. You can talk to me. I'll be on the ball fields, at chorus concerts, at curriculum nights, at math clubs, and everywhere in between. Moving forward, we must continue to ensure that all of our children are safe, that they feel successful, and that they feel secure, and that they receive equal access to all Brighton has to offer. My experiences as a pediatrician, as an educator, and as a mother of 3 school-age children uniquely positions me to be an advocate for all our students, our teachers, and all our community members in the Brighton Board of Education. And I would very much appreciate your vote on May 16th.
Thank you, Susan. Carrielyn?
Thank you. I wanted to thank everyone again for participating this evening, especially the other candidates up here. This process is not easy, and I really admire all of your courage and your heart to serve. I also wanted to give a special shout out to Julian Gilbert, who is retiring from her board position after 20 years of service. You have been an incredible gift to this community. I was initially so excited to potentially be a part of this team and the work of this district that I conveniently ignored that I would have to talk about myself. So cue the moments of panic, but here I go. My experience, energy, and passion for this type of work puts me in a very unique position to serve alongside the current board. My lens is one of a historical perspective as a student, an educator, and a current parent in this district. I think it is truly, truly important to recognize and celebrate all the areas of growth and accomplishment this district has achieved. But with that being said, it is equally important, if not more, to recognize the areas that require improvement and vision of the future. Public education will always be a continual process of growth. I am a proud and proven collaborator, listener, teammate, and a champion for teachers and students. If I'm elected, I am very aware this will be a very steep learning curve, but please know that I am dedicated to serving this district in a very new way. If you want to know more about me or ask additional questions, you can head over to carrielynbertino.com. And so here it is, that moment where I humbly ask for your support. I would truly be grateful for your vote for me on May 16th to be your newest Brighton Board of Education member.
Thank you, Carrielyn. Victoria?
So firstly, I just want to again thank everyone for attending this forum and for the people that might be viewing online for your time and attention. It has been kind of a nerve-wracking but enjoyable experience and definitely a learning experience for me as a new candidate. In honesty, I never imagined that I would launch a campaign for myself. I've only ever supported other candidates, but this time, in this experience, I just truly felt like I had an unyielding call to action, and I just felt that it was very important to listen to that. And why? Why was I feeling that way? It's just that I feel that representation matters. It matters in schools, and it matters in our community. When I saw that the minimum eligibility requirement to enter Brighton Central School District Board of Elections is just 1 year, the decision was easy to make. And I reason it this way. Brighton acknowledges that it is a diverse community, and the board is composed of members that have long-standing ties to Brighton, and of course that is a necessity and an advantage and is critical for the successful operation of the board. I love working with people who share and who hold historical knowledge and connections because continuity and efficiency are preserved. Still, many of us intuitively know that innovation and growth is facilitated by bridging traditional ways and methods with new information, technologies, and people from diverse backgrounds, different lived experiences, and who have different approaches to doing things. The length of time a family lives in a community is also a form of diversity. I am running for an opportunity to represent all community members, including new families, and I have firsthand experience raising biracial children.
You could conclude
and
really
raising-
quickly, Victoria.
Thank you.
Thank you. Larry?
Well, starting from a point of gratitude, my thanks to Amy and Robin for setting this up, to our great camera folks who have been moving around, getting everything in focus as best they can, so thank you all very much for that. And for everybody who's here and who's going to watch this over the next week leading up to the election on the 16th. I'm also asking for your vote to be able to serve this great community. We love where we live. We understand how special Brighton Central School District is. And I have greatly appreciated the learning I have undertaken to serve this community. It truly is a challenge. It is an occasional headache. It is often wonderful. But in this day and age, it's incredibly important to serve on a school board. And that service is only getting more important, quite frankly. I'm asking for your vote so I can continue to serve this community in that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. So this concludes our program for this evening. Thank you to each of the candidates for your willingness to step into this important role within your community. I wish you all the best of luck. And thank you, Robin, for including me in tonight's Meet the Candidate night. It was my pleasure to be the moderator. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Robin.
Thank you very much. Thank you again for moderating this very important discussion. And thank you to all of our candidates for for being here tonight, for introducing yourselves to our community and letting us get to know you better. It was really informational. Thank you to our audience here in person, and thank you to the audience out there, and thank you for everyone who submitted questions as well. Thank you for our tech crew. You guys did an amazing job making the live stream happen, and especially to Dan Goldman, who does everything everywhere in Brighton. Lastly, again, I want to remind you to go vote. The vote is May 16th from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. right here in the Central Administration Building, which is at 2035 Monroe Avenue. Please go vote. Thank you.
This has been a special presentation from the Brighton Central School District Board of Education.